You're listening to a Euclid and Oaks production.
Down. Get down. Down. The bass and sound. Get down. The bass and sound. Get down. The bass and sound. Get down. The bass and sound.
Hello everyone, it's that time again. Time for that Bitcoin show. On today's episode, you get to hear our conversation with Andreas Antonopoulos. We recorded with him on October 4th, and according to Coin Market Cap, the price of Bitcoin was around $8,100. Right now, as I record this little intro, it's a little bit below 8,000. Who knows where it's going to head? Maybe up, maybe down. Who knows? Don't pay too much attention to the price. The Bitcoin dominance was sitting at around 67% on October 4th. Today's random fact: craving ice cream is a symptom.
Ice.
Oh.
You just messed that all up.
Today's random fact: craving ice is a symptom of iron deficiency. Is that true?
It is.
I'm your host, Crypto Euclid.
And I'm Mystical Oaks.
And this is that Bitcoin show. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are beyond excited. We have Andreas Antonopoulos on the show today. How are you, Andreas?
I'm doing great. How are you?
We're doing fantastic. Like we just had a little pre-chat, and I told you how crazy life is. It's got its ups, it's got its downs, but it would be boring if it wasn't that way, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, they say that. They say you can't experience the highs if you don't experience the lows. So
yeah.
Whoever they are.
I definitely feel that, this is a difficult time of the year. I don't do too well with the weather change, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
When the skies get really gray, my mood gets really gray.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to work really hard to pick myself up and keep positive and things like that. So whereas the rest of the year, it's more easy to just do that automatically.
Mm-hmm.
This time of the year, it requires a bit of effort and discipline and kind of mindfulness.
Do you have issues with like depression and stuff?
Oh yeah, I mean mostly anxiety, but also seasonal depression. Yeah, sure, absolutely. I mean, who doesn't, right? It's the human condition.
Right.
We all have issues.
Why is that though? Why can't we just, and this is me just whining and crying, okay? This is I'm playing the victim right now. Why can't we be perfect? Why can't we just be happy to be alive?
What is perfect?
I mean, just at least experience like joy like all the time. Why not? Why do we have to go through depression and anxiety? And I have it severely bad at times. Why?
Yeah.
Why?
I mean, the best answer I can come up with is evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like the idea of wouldn't it be great if we didn't feel pain, right? And if you read the medical literature and you find out that people who, for whatever reason, neurological or something else, have no pain perception, their life is hell. They hate it. It's a nightmare because they constantly get injured without noticing. And so what would happen, I think, is if we didn't have these evolutionary responses to real stressors, right, we would have lower survivability. The problem is that when you have this sensitivity to real stressors, you also sometimes have it to imaginary stressors or threats. And so you have to work against that. But, it's a survival thing. And it's worked beautifully for how many million years for all species and for ours for a few 100,000.
So you said that it's imagined, and that's true. The threat, the when we have anxiety, it's a fear of something that's most likely not going to happen. The event. Why does our brain create this imaginary fear, and to a threat that's non-existent? There's not a lion sitting there. Why am I anxious?
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, as kind of highly social beings that are now living in a very constructed society, there are no tigers in the bushes, but our bodies haven't adjusted to that.
Right.
Our beings are evolved for survival against tigers in the bushes. I was reading a really interesting study recently that a lot of the chronic diseases we have to do with inflammatory and coagulatory response. Basically, our blood is designed to thicken quickly so that we can survive very bad bleeding wounds because we were exposed to a lot of that, and our immune system is designed to be very reactive to fight off aggressive infections. And now that we have neither of those, we end up getting allergies and autoimmune diseases and arthritis and various dementia-related diseases and heart diseases, all of which are inflammatory responses. And we end up getting heart attacks and strokes, etc., which are all because our blood thickens too fast. So, like, we're over-engineered to survive an environment that doesn't exist anymore. And and now it's working against us because we live in a world where we're not exposed to these threats. It's a bizarre kind of thing, but I kind of like the fact that just the craziness of randomly directed evolution and adaptation that leaves all of these little quirks and bugs and weird conditions in every species that are just something that happened 100,000 years ago, like leftovers,
Well, I just want to say, are there not tigers in the bushes? I feel like now they're not necessarily tigers; they're more people.
Yes, but the chance of getting mauled by a people is is much lower than it used to be. So at least for those of us who are fortunate enough to live in relatively safe societies.
Do you mean, Tamara, a person doing you physical harm, or you mean a person just out to get you in other sense?
Both ways.
Right.
Well, that's what we overreact to that, right?
Right.
So now it's not a tiger in the bush; it's the coworker who ate my yogurt.
Right.
And I'm like, that was my yogurt. I put my name on it. It was in the fridge. You've done it 3 times this week.
Right.
What's wrong with you, Charlie? And you get all anxious and upset and conflict, right? And it's
true.
It's seemingly insignificant, but the brain doesn't know that.
Right. You perceive it as a threat to your being. It's like, how dare
it's
you?
definitely a threat to your yogurt.
Well, yeah.
Existential.
Yeah.
Existential threat.
Well, when you're a teenager and everything was so over the top important, high school was so important, and this, random thing was so important. And I think what happens is, as we get older, these things are still happening to us, and maybe we're not learning that not everything is so important. I think it's hard to filter out, what is important and what you should focus on. And I just had sort of an existential crisis myself with my over involvement in social media. I came to the conclusion that I'm there too much, and that it is a world that I've decided to inhabit 24 hours a day. Even when I'm not on it, I was thinking about it. And I realized that was at the detriment of my family and the people that are important in my life, and myself too, my health. And I took a step back, and I realized it's time to, kind of figure out, reevaluate what I'm doing with all this stuff.
He's just read one Zen article, and now he claims to be the Zen master. So
well, that is true. That is true. I read this one simple thing, and this is like a clickbait title, but it's true. I read that, and I've always sort of been into like shamanism and stuff, and learning how to, when things get really crazy and out of hand, to just stop and calm down and meditate. And I just read, about a little bit about Zen, and it was just really simple. It was like breathe in gratitude and exhale, love. And it kind of just clicked with me, and that's the kind of the gist of it. And be now, because everything that's not now is either it's happened in the past or it's going to happen in the future. You can't control those things. And we have to, I guess it boils down to living in the moment and being okay with what's happening now, I guess.
Well, I had a question for Andreas. When he mentioned that he's having like a harder time now with seasons, what do you do to pick yourself up, to keep yourself in more the positive mindset? Because from what I see, you can't stop. Like you're going all the time. You have something planned and you have to be there, and it's important for you to be in, I guess, the best mood possible so that you can speak to people and have them get it.
Yeah, I mean, the behind the scenes, there's a whole team of people helping me. I have 11 people on my team. Wow. So it's not just me. There's a lot more, but it's like a duck, calm above the water, furious pedaling below the water surface. Organizing a speaking tour or a series of videos, doing production stuff, putting out high quality video, audio, podcast interviews. Even this, it takes a team. You interacted with a couple of people to do that, and for me, then my job shifts slightly to managing a team and managing businesses, which I've done before, and it's a skill like anything else, but it also requires that I'm in a good place myself. So, and for that, I have various people helping me and various things that I try to do to keep in shape. So whether it's mental health, I'm a very strong believer in having mental health support, and that means seeing a therapist and talking about techniques for managing a healthy outlook on life and managing anxiety. I need to. I don't really have a choice, but I also want to. And also having fitness in my life. Like you run, and it's had an impact on your well-being. I need to do fitness fairly regularly, otherwise it's a new concept to me. I didn't do it when I was younger, and it helps me keep my sanity. And other things like when I get stressed out, I'll turn on some music and dance in the kitchen and go for a walk and spend time in nature, step away from screens. I very carefully limit my screen time.
That's important.
Both overall exposure and making sure it's in specific times, and not just whenever I happen to be next to it, as much as possible. And I fail at that all the time, of course. I have routines, and then I often fail at these routines and have to remind myself why they're good for me and try again and rebuild them.
Right.
And it's a constant effort, but it allows me to be productive and to get my team to be productive and to achieve a lot in a short period of time, and I'm happy about that because I'm enjoying the work I do.
I was going to ask you...
We enjoy that work you do too. So.
Yes, definitely. I was going to ask you, are you pleased with how things are going?
In terms of my work and my personal life, absolutely. Yeah, I'm having a great time. I feel very positive about the work I'm doing. I'm content, but in terms of the world as a whole, yeah, I'm generally an optimist. There are times when I'm like, oh God, really, it's a bit of a mess right now. But then again, the world's always been a mess. Right. It's just, you either perceive it and try to do something about it, or sometimes for some people, ignorance is bliss.
That's true.
Is that your mission? And I was going to ask you, why are you doing this? Is it because of the joy that you receive, or do you feel, are you an activist, or you feel driven for some purpose, some reason to make the change through educating people about, Bitcoin and cryptocurrency? What's your motivation?
So For me, I think it's both, right? Because I receive joy from having my actions be in line with my principles, my beliefs, my worldview.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the only way to have peace and joy is to be internally consistent, as much as any human is able to do that. Of course, we all have blind spots and inconsistencies, but
Right.
if you're doing things that are not consistent with what you believe or what you think you should be doing, it makes you miserable.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I care about and have always cared about as far back as I remember as a child, and obviously this is a very big part of the influence of my parents, is justice,
Mm-hmm.
and having a world where people have opportunities like the ones I was very fortunate to have as a child,
Mm-hmm.
and a world where there is justice. And of course, that world can never exist perfectly, but as long as I'm doing things that make the world a bit more in aligned with that,
Mm-hmm.
that's great. I don't know if I'm going to be successful or not. That's not the point. The point is that I I feel that every day that I'm doing something that's in alignment with what I believe in,
I love
and
that.
that keeps me happy and it keeps me sane.
So the gist of it is that you don't know. We don't know for sure that what we're doing is going to work, but the
Or
point
makes
is
a difference.
you just keep doing it, and if you believe that it is in the right direction, that it's going. And
I see things clicking. I see like
Yeah, well,
gears turning in your head.
that's why I'm doing this stuff, is because I want to learn. I am a being that wants to learn things, and every time I speak to people like Andreas Antonopoulos, who I think are extremely wise, I try to learn.
Well, thank you so much, but it's it's for everyone. That's a process, right?
Right.
For me, I find that reading books is one of the ways I learn, and in the last few years, I found that writing books is a way I learn. Teaching others is part of my learning modality, as they call it.
Right.
But I read a lot of books, and I enjoy reading very much. You mentioned earlier something about living in the now,
Mm-hmm.
and I was thinking about that. Immediately made me think of Eckhart Tolle.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've read his book, his
You-
his best known book, which is The Power of Now, but any of his books or watch his videos, he's
I know of
quite
him. Yeah.
yeah,
Actually,
amazing stuff.
Yuki doesn't read very much at all, honestly.
My brain
Other
won't
than
allow me to focus.
Twitter. I think it's like an ADD thing, but you did actually purchase one of his
Videos.
books
Yeah.
several years
Yeah.
ago. That is one book that you've purchased on your
Okay.
own.
So finish
without
what
me.
you were saying, though. You were saying about Toll, about the living in the now.
Well, no, more broader point, I think, to what Tamara was just saying is that everybody has different learning modalities, right?
Right.
So for me, it's reading. That doesn't mean that that's the only way. For other people, it's video. For other people, it's listening to audiobooks. Some people have to do in order to learn,
Yeah.
hands-on. Some people have to write notes while they're learning, or draw pictures, or doodle, or whatever. Everybody has a different way of learning, which, of course, our school system tries to kill at a very early age.
Right.
But
That's true.
that's part of why I do the work I do and the way I do it, in that I try to produce content in as many different media as possible. So books and videos and audio and performance and interactive and Q&A, so that I can find ways to reach people who learn in different ways as much as possible. And even for something like Eckhart Tolle that I just mentioned, there's the video and the audio book. It doesn't have to be.
Right. Yeah.
Well, so how where did you, okay, let me back up. And I came across you, I think it was, well, I got into Bitcoin in 2015. I got exposed to it. And I think it was a little bit after that I started to figure out what the heck this stuff was. And you were one of the first persons, I saw a video on, and you did such a great job of explaining what it is, and made it to where to me, it clicked that it wasn't just, a way to send money and stuff back and forth, but there was so much more to it. You've written books in the past. When did you break out? I know that you're mastering Bitcoin. Was that your kind of got you out there? Because I know you've been on Joe Rogan's podcast. You're out there in the mainstream media. How did you, was it your book that really kind of let people know about you?
It was a bit of a surprise for me too. So before I got involved in Bitcoin, I was doing public speaking and teaching for many, many years in other topics that interested me in: information security, data centers, cloud computing, internet technologies, and things like that. It's kind of all related to the same
right
stuff around the internet, but different aspects of it. And I was doing conferences and doing speaking, so I had some skills around explaining things to people and teaching different subjects and doing them in a kind of performative way on stage. And when I got involved in Bitcoin, I looked around and I saw some world-class programmers, and while I am a programmer, I'm pretty good. In Bitcoin, I'm meh compared to some of the superstars, and so I realized there was a big gap, and the gap was there weren't any people really helping explain it and who had the kind of mix of skills that I did.
Mm-hmm.
So I started doing conference talks and podcasts with Adam Levine in 2013, and then at the San Jose conference was the first time I spoke, and this was May or April 2013, and no one watched it. Like, literally, I had an empty room. And then the podcast, people started listening to the podcast and heard my name through that, and I did some Reddit posts, and people on Reddit, like within the community, the very small Bitcoin community at that point, people were beginning to hear my name again and again.
Right.
It's like, oh, this guy, his name sounds like Acropolis, can't pronounce it. And then one day I woke up to a bunch of tweets from Joe Rogan.
Oh.
Like, and my mentions were just a mess. And I thought, okay, first of all, who's Joe Rogan? Never heard of him.
Really?
Had never heard of him.
Okay.
And then I saw his photo, and I'm like, oh, the Fear Factor guy.
Yeah,
right. Fear Factor.
Fear Factor guy.
And I'm like, I think I've seen one of his comedy sketches or something like that. It was, I had a weird recollection, but I wasn't sure. And I go back and I find out that overnight while I was sleeping, someone on Reddit said, let's get Andreas on Joe Rogan, and then created this spontaneous campaign and got 100, 200, 300 people, I don't know how many, to nag him on Twitter for hours. Until eventually he just relented and said, oh, okay, sure, we'll get this guy on. And I woke up to this and I'm like, you volunteered me?
Right.
And I went on that show, and because it just everything kind of clicked. I had just I had kind of a bit of popularity within the community, but a 3-hour program where I got to explain it in detail to someone who was asking good questions and was patient, and he's really good at that, to an audience that has nothing to do with this. And he had at the time about 1.5 million people in his audience.
Wow.
And I walked away from that thinking, oh, that was pretty cool. It was a good conversation. He's got a pretty good audience. Maybe some people heard it. And my life just went off the rails. I had planned by the end of that year to finally reach like 5,000 followers on Twitter. And I was building them like 20 a week. And I walked into that studio and walked out, and in a week it was 5,000. The next week it was 10. The week after was 15.
Wow.
And it just went exponential. And I was like, what the hell just happened? People started recognizing me, and anyway, it was just kind of like a breakthrough. I didn't really expect it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, a whole bunch of other things happened, and gradually, and that's when I was starting work on the book. And so the book came a lot after. I think Joe Rogan was probably the biggest push
Right.
there. And it's, yeah.
And now here we are.
And here we are, exactly.
When you were a child, did you, was this your goal? Like, when you grew up, did you want to do this?
I don't think this was a thing.
I mean, yes, this is a thing. He's got something he's passionate in that he believes is going to solve a lot of injustice in the world, and he's speaking about it 24/7, 365 days a year. So,
Right.
No, I never imagined I could or would do this kind of thing. I was always passionate about technology. I was always passionate about the social implications of technology, and I had several phases in my life where I got super excited about something and wanted to tell everyone around me.
Mm-hmm.
And I did some teaching and stuff like that. But until Bitcoin, I don't think I had a thing that was driving me this hard, other than the internet in general. And so I certainly didn't have the audience or the opportunity to do it on the scale that I'm doing it now.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the idea that I could actually make this into a job, and I use like silly quotes around that, because it's not really a job. It's just like I get to do the thing I would do and enjoy anyway.
Right.
Only now I can actually finance it because
Mm-hmm.
I have support from the community. It's amazing. It's incredible. I could never imagine it. Like if you do my life backwards, and if I look at where I arrived, it's inconceivable to the teenage me that I would be in America for one thing, in the United States, that I would be doing something in computers that was inconceivable, and that I would actually be enjoying it and be successful at it. None of my background could possibly. It's the same experience many people have with Bitcoin. Like if you got into Bitcoin in 2012, 2013, and you look around, you're like, I mean, this will never like blow up.
Right.
And then it does, and you're like, wow.
Yes.
I've got so many different directions we can take this. Something that I just saw that was kind of a little scary to me, or I read an article where Google has claimed that they have invented a computer that could possibly, and they didn't, I don't think they claimed this, but someone speculated that they could break Bitcoin with it. And this kind of leads into
quantum computers.
Yeah, this leads kind of into the whole quantum computers, AI, artificial intelligence, and that sort of thing. Is this, first of all, let me ask you, do you think that's a possibility that Google does have a computer that, powerful that it could break Bitcoin? And then next, I'd like to maybe touch on AI.
I mean, yeah, so I think AI and quantum computing are both fields, a bit like Bitcoin, where the vast majority of people who have heard these terms do not understand what they mean in depth. And the most outlandish claims can get media attention because nobody really understands how to do careful research and analysis in these spaces. So let's talk first about the quantum supremacy announcement by Google, which was actually a leak on the NASA website that they didn't intend to get out because it's actually classified, and got out. What they meant by quantum supremacy is that until now, all of the kinds of things they could do with a quantum computer were things that you could also do in a reasonable amount of time with a classical computer. So maybe it was a bit faster, but it's like, okay, so is this really quantum? Are we really getting a huge difference? And nobody was really sure. I'm grossly simplifying this.
Thank you.
But and it's my understanding of it is grossly simplified. But what Google managed to do recently, which they call quantum supremacy, is solve a problem that, by the nature of the problem, would take some of the most powerful classical computers we have today thousands of years. And they solved it with a quantum computer in a matter of, I don't know, not thousands of years.
Right.
And at that point, you're like, okay, this is clearly doing something that is not possible with classic computers, therefore supremacy. Supremacy simply meaning it has exceeded the capabilities of classical computers.
Right.
And that's all it was. It was a milestone that, we can really say at this point it is doing quantum computing, because if it wasn't doing quantum computing, there's no way it could solve the problem in a conceivable time. So that's what they meant. That's what they said. That's what the announcement was about. How far is that from cracking ECDSA? Very, very, very far, like orders of magnitude far.
Right.
We're talking about hundreds of uncorrected qubits. Breaking ECDSA by some calculations requires thousands of error-corrected qubits, which is a whole other type of problem. We're nowhere near that.
Okay.
Even if some quantum computers exist that are a generation or two ahead of what has been seen in public, which is likely, still not at that level, and very unlikely to be even close to that level. And even if that kind of thing did exist, it would exist in such a deep buried vault under Area 51 or some other secret location, and would never be used for anything. And the reason it wouldn't be used is because the secret that you have it is more important than the ability to use it.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that you keep that. Have you heard the expression "keeping the powder dry"?
Mm-hmm.
You don't fire off your best weapon until you absolutely, positively have no other recourse. So if you have a quantum computer that can break every commercial encryption system, every military encryption system out there, because that's what we're talking about, it's not just Bitcoin, then what you do is you never tell anyone, and you bury that secret as deep as you can, and you don't use it, because one day you might have to use it to defuse a nuclear arming system, to infiltrate the communications of someone who's attacking your country or whatever.
Right.
So it's your doomsday weapon, and you only use it when doomsday. You certainly don't use it to break some silly little anarchist fake internet money.
Right. I like.
And then if it becomes broadly available, then it diffuses the whole situation. Because if you have broadly available quantum computing of that capability, then you simply use quantum computing to do quantum encryption and digital signatures and other algorithms that cannot be broken by quantum computers. So if you encrypt with a quantum computer, you can't break it with a quantum computer.
Mm-hmm.
The disparity only exists if you use an encryption algorithm that's a classical computer, and then you can break that with a quantum computer.
Mm-hmm.
But if everybody has a quantum computer, then you've got viable encryption again. You've got viable cryptography. And the question most people have is about that interim phase, where some people have it, but not everybody has it. And what if those some people use it to break something?
Mm-hmm.
Bitcoin is the least of our worries. Also, it can be upgraded. So this is all like a bit science fiction-y, and it's not really serious conversation in my mind. It's the academic interest is there, of course, and it's useful to think about scenarios that unfold over the next 20, 25, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
But, Bitcoin's not going to be even marginally affected for a very long time.
You mentioned that reminded me of you talking about asymmetric power. And so my question is, what can the average person do to make that more symmetrical, to kind of shift the power?
Actually, you don't want to shift the power, because if you think of the average person, there's a hell of a lot more of us than there are of the non-average people. So asymmetric power actually works to the benefit of individuals. Individuals who don't have systemic power, institutionalized power, government power, corporate power, etc.
Right.
Are better suited to asymmetric competition. because there's a hell of a lot more of us. And this goes to any area, whether it's privacy or surveillance, or it's cryptography, whether it's politics.
Right, but only if we're united, right? Like, I mean, if there's just a bunch of us running around,
True.
you know, not knowing
Sure,
what we're
but,
supposed to be doing.
You know,
then.
many studies in sociology have shown that the number of people it takes to actually create a movement that creates a tipping point is about between 3.5% and 4% of the population.
Okay.
So you get 4% of the population to solidly unite behind an idea and hit the streets, and the noise they create is big enough to persuade the rest of the population that they actually have the majority. It's a weird sociological phenomenon. It can be dangerous, of course.
Right, the
because,
squeaky wheel.
yes, the wrong ideas being driven by a small minority can also drive society to believe that this is now mainstream.
What should we be united for, Tamara? What you said we should unite. What is the issue?
Oh, you're asking me a
Well,
question. I'm not.
we were looking at you were talking about the banks and stuff, and you had an interesting thing where you were.
Oh, I was just looking up about banks, and like, this is not my area, but you know, I believe banks are broken. You know, we complain all the time that why are they closed when most normal people need to get to them? You know, most people work a 9-to-5 job, and the banks close at like 4:30, and they're only open half a day Saturday, and they're closed Sunday. So it's kind of ridiculous. Like, if you have my money, I think maybe you should be open 24/7, or at least later, you know, in the day. but when I was looking into it, it was interesting to me, because I think I read an article, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, but I read an article that like the first banks were started by the Knights Templar, and in the pilgrimage, I guess, of the Christians going to Jerusalem, and they needed to finance this, but it wasn't very safe to be traveling with tons of money on you. So I think the Knights Templar kind of stepped in, and it's like, you can leave your money here and you can get your money in Jerusalem.
So once you arrive in your destination, your money is there.
And I think that was kind of the first bank.
Well, yeah, informal money transfer systems like that started around the same time by not just the Knights Templar, several different groups. So merchants groups as well that had access to that. People who were mining or smelting gold, so who had gold vaults, became, by extension, proto-bankers and did informal money transfer networks with IOUs and letters of credit and things like that.
Right.
Yeah, but you've got to understand that I think today we're not the customers of the bank.
Right.
We're their depository base that they need to fulfill the reserve requirements of the regulatory system.
Good point.
They need to have enough cash for liquidity to fulfill the regulatory requirements, but they don't make money on deposits. They don't make money on customers like you and I. In fact, they lose money. Branches are expensive to maintain and operate. They're trying to push as much of it as possible into, robotic machines and kiosks and ATMs and self-service and online, because they don't want you in the bank and they don't want to interact with you as much as possible.
I can tell.
Yeah, because you cost money. What they do want is for you to park money into their systems that they can then leverage 10 to 1 and make money from their real customers. And their real customers are really two categories. One is companies that they fund through loans, so the debt, and the ability to leverage cheap money from the Federal Reserve. So if they can take cheap money on one end from the Federal Reserve and push that out as loans, you're simply a line on the balance sheet that allows them to check in with the regulators and say, yeah, we have enough cash.
Right.
And it's not important. They don't make any profit. All of their profit comes from other activities. And so they serve you exactly as much as you would expect for a cost center. You're an annoying necessity, not a customer. And that's why the system is broken. It's because it's based on debt, and it drives an economy of debt and financialization and cheap credit, that is about, as I've said, you've probably heard this expression before, it's about finding the biggest flow of money, sticking a straw in it, and sucking as much of it as possible as it goes by you.
Right.
So they position themselves as intermediaries to skim basis points, small percentages of giant flows of money, and those small percentages add up to massive amounts of money, which they can then use to buy politicians,
Right.
and ensure that they remain the trusted intermediaries without any competition. In any other business, we would call this a criminal syndicate or cartel.
Right.
And because it's the biggest criminal syndicate or cartel in the world, it's the only one that doesn't get called a criminal syndicate or cartel, because anybody who calls it that gets removed from the newspaper, TV station, media, whatever, that they occupy. So,
Right.
Are
you worried about that?
Reelected. No, I'm not worried at all, because I have enough of a voice and enough diverse channels that and I'm like a mosquito. I'm annoying in a general way, but I'm not existentially threatening.
Right.
Of course, I am carrying the Bitcoin virus.
Right. I was going to say, unless you're carrying malaria.
So, but
Yeah, exactly. But but I am worried about people who are more directly pushing against that.
Okay.
Like some of the politicians who are talking about that right now.
Right. Okay.
Isn't that sort of, I asked Tamara, what she thinks the focus is. Isn't I guess in this situation, Bitcoin fixes the problem with the banking. Isn't the banks sort of the problem? Wouldn't you say what it boils down to it? And that's why, Bitcoin is so great, is because it's an alternative to traditional banks. So isn't the focus pointing out kind of what we should, I'm not saying be against, but what needs to be, focused on is the problem. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, are banks the main concern, the banking system?
So I don't think it's the banking system per se. The banking system is really a symptom of a broader issue, because it's a bit central banking, it's a bit investment banking, it's a bit retail banking, but it's also political parties, it's democratic institutions, it's regulatory organizations, it's all of these aspects of people who find themselves without agency, where their voice is lost or deliberately suppressed, and where people are beginning to realize that they don't have a part in these systems. The systems have grown to a point where they're too big, right? And so on the one hand, we have these systems that have grown too big and they're too centralized. On the other hand, they're not able to grow to actually fill the needs of the world. So I look at these and I think most of the systems we're talking about, central banking, investment banking, the current political institutions we have, they're all fairly recent. They're all mostly 20th century, maybe 19th century creations, right? They came out of rapid industrialization, the World War, and kind of the manufacturing globalization changes that happened on this planet. And at the same time that those institutions are broken today, they were actually enormously impactful and raised billions of people out of poverty and created a modern world that is much, much better than it was in the past in terms of the middle class that exists today. That's how kings used to live in the 16th, 17th, 18th century. That's how the ultra rich used to live, the way the, let's say, developed nations middle class lives today. So on the one hand, these institutions brought a lot of people into a much better quality of life. And then they reached a point where they couldn't scale anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And we now live in a world that's much more interconnected. We have globalization. We have big problems that are now planetary scale problems,
Right.
Whether that's climate change, whether it's the rise of authoritarianism, whether it's superpowers fighting geopolitics, whether it's refugee movements. All of these giant problems, you can't contain them within one nation state. You can't say, I'm going to, you keep your pollution, I'm going to have clean air. Or,
Right.
I can destroy the democratic institutions of your country, and then when a million of your people come streaming across the border, I'm going to be like, what, my problem? Pfft, build a wall.
Right.
The bottom line is that we live in a world that's much more connected, and so these things spill over, right? But our institutions and all of these kind of industrial era institutions were not designed to scale like that. They weren't designed to be cross-border institutions, and we don't really have new institutions to replace them. The centralization of all of these institutions has made them fail to scale to meet the needs of these modern globalized societies, and we're not addressing the big problems.
Right.
So that's what it's not banking. It's really all of the 19th and 20th century institutions are simply failing to scale to the needs of this planet. And now we need new institutions.
Right.
Networked, we need new non-institutions. We need protocols. We need networked, decentralized mechanisms for governance and organization and payments and finance and social activism and all of the other do as people that actually scale to solve global problems.
Right.
And we're rapidly heading to becoming a type 1 civilization, and we really need to start acting like one.
Because I was going to say, isn't it our fault also that we're just so complacent about things? We're just like, I'm not worried about what my Siri or my Alexa is going to hear because I'm not doing anything wrong. So who cares? Is that kind of a thing? We're just too comfortable with these new things that we're enjoying, and we're not really looking at the I can't even say it.
I can't
implications.
Say it.
Yeah, I mean, but as the saying goes, who's we?
Right. Exactly. It started with
the
a
we
who's they.
you talk about is a vanishingly narrow sliver of humanity. The we that has the modern conveniences, the stable institutions, stable currencies, the for now absence of death squads combing through the neighborhood to find dissidents who are not following the party line or the dear leader, and shooting them on the curb. That we is far less than a third of humanity, possibly less than a fifth of humanity.
Okay.
And then there's the other 4/5, or as I like to say, there's the other 6 billion, right? And so that complacency is actually a reflection of the benefits of freedom and comfort and of a quality of life where you can ignore these things because they don't directly affect you.
Right.
And you can make choices that are easier because you don't have to make the hard choices. And, there's two ways you can look about it. Either it would be great if everybody lived like that, or we need something that's sustainable so that everybody can live like that. But the problem is that if the 1/5 that have that are not aware of the fact that the other 4/5 don't, at some point those problems come back and bite you, right?
Yeah.
You can't ignore them for too long, and that's really the nature of the crises we're facing right now, which is if you live in the luxury of ignorance where you can ignore these problems, they start leaking into your reality.
That's true.
I wanted to.
I was telling Yuki that the other day. Like, you know, and my views of looking at it are completely different than someone else's, but I feel like if there's something that you need to fix, it just keeps coming back, and it'll get worse. If you don't notice what's going on and notice that there's an issue and don't do something about it, it's just going to keep happening and get worse and worse. So you have to address it.
That's true.
Right. That can happen on a personal scale in someone's life, right?
Right.
Whether it's a relationship, right, where you ignore problems in a relationship until they become untenable and it blows up in your face because you didn't address it when it was small, because you were too busy thinking about other things, or in a family, or in a school, or in a business, or in a neighborhood, and so, or in a city, right? And these things happen at every scale.
It's true.
I was going to ask you, there's a, you know, I kind of believe this, that, and
I love that you say you kind of believe that. that really made me
well, listen,
believe you.
Listen to what I'm going to ask before you start giggling over there.
I can't help it.
I think it was Elon Musk was even talking about the fact that AI is going to get so intelligent and it's going to figure out that humans are the problem and it eradicates us like Terminator. Do you think that's a possibility? I mean, why couldn't it happen?
I think the bigger issue is that at the moment, a lot of people are doing things to generate value, or are being used by others to generate value for things that do not require human creativity. And so boring, repetitive, mindless work. And even before AI decides to terminate us, it radically disrupts society's structure by making a lot of human activity unnecessary or inefficient and replacing it, right? I'm not talking about kiosk forwarding in McDonald's, but that's on a global scale and over the next 10 years. And, you know, I'm not the type to believe that, all the jobs are going to be going away because we're going to be replaced with machines. That's been a conversation that's been happening literally for thousands of years.
I know.
That we will not have work because a new level of technology, a new invention will make it unnecessary for a lot of people, and then they won't have anything to do.
Right,
sure, technology is often disruptive and these things happen. But people adapt, right? For every job that's lost in one area, other jobs are created in other areas in new ways. The problem is the people who lose their jobs, especially if they're late in their ability to learn, you know, beyond a certain age, can't retrain, can't become productive again, can't be, I hate this term, useful to society.
Right.
I don't measure people like that.
Yeah.
Fuck useful to society.
Right.
But, you know, the social systems we have tend to do that. They reduce people to how much productive utility they add to society and dehumanize them.
It's true.
So that's the problem. And that's a societal problem. It has nothing to do with AI or technology. It has to do with how we value people.
I wanted to talk about your latest book that you're writing with the two co-authors, but I have one quick question before I, unless you have anything else, Tamara. Okay, so I have
so many things, but
yeah, we've got a ton of stuff, but obviously, you know, we can't sit here all day.
I could.
I mean, I could, but other people, you know, are, it's not just us here, Tamara. Okay, so I wanted to ask you a question. You said it takes a team to pull off what you're doing. What's your advice to someone who maybe doesn't have a team, but is, you know, wants to get out there and do what you're doing?
Well, I mean, I didn't have a team before I had a team.
He didn't start with a team. You don't start with a team.
Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, exactly. When I started this, I had zero income and I did everything myself. And Um, I think for me, it boils down to making a lot of difficult choices, saying no to a lot of things because you have to remain focused, and it's very easy to get drawn in too many directions and lose focus. And then 99% luck. So, you know, the problem with asking people who have succeeded in any area of life, well, how did you get there? Is that, first of all, it's very unlikely that the path that may have led one person to some area of success is going to be the same for anybody else.
Right.
It's highly individualized. And the second part of that, and I believe very, very strongly about this, is that more than 90% luck. Meaning that I see life as a whitewater river rafting expedition, right? And I'm in my canoe and I've got a paddle. And I can persuade myself very easily that I am in control of my destiny, and my paddling has achieved the amazing results I've achieved by putting me exactly where I wanted on the other bank of the river. The truth is that I had, you know, anywhere between 1% and 5% control over the direction I was going, and the river was just deciding for me. Chaos was ruling. Now, that worldview does not mean you stop paddling. You absolutely do paddling, even if it's only 1%. It can make the difference between drowning and not, and and at least it gives you the satisfaction of feeling in control, and you get a nice workout. But don't for a moment think, hey, I got here because of me.
Right.
I do not believe that. For every person who succeeds, there's 1,000 people who are 10 times more hardworking, productive, creative, etc., and were just 10 seconds late to one appointment and made one insignificant choice in one direction versus another, and the chaos of the universe put them in a completely different place. So every time I look back at what I've done, I think, boy, have I been lucky. And so I can't really give any advice. I can say that being productive is a skill like any other, and I have been very fortunate in having good mentors who've taught me many of the skills that I use in business. And I've tried and tried again and failed several businesses in the past that have taught me very useful lessons that I've taken forward and been a bit more successful in this one. But yeah, the team is all about scaling. It's all about leverage. Right. I'm still doing my thing. It's just that I'm able to spend more time doing my thing and less time trying to figure out which taxi company can pick me up from which airport at what time, so that I can actually get there to do my thing. And that's a blessing, because I can find people who are actually really good at that, and I suck at it. So part of it is not identifying strengths, but rather finding all of the things that I suck at and then hiring people who are better at it.
I love that. That's great.
I think the takeaway I have is to know when to say no, that you can't do everything, and you will be, even my little bit of Twitter fame, I have to tell people no, you have to, and I don't like to.
You're a people pleaser.
I'm a people pleaser. I want to make everyone happy. That's why I like everyone's replies and things, and I get wrapped up in making sure everyone's happy. But then I've learned that you can't do that. That not everyone matters.
Not unless you make yourself miserable.
Right.
And that's going to kill your productivity.
And the other gist of it is to keep paddling, and that I think that's pretty much the point. And like you said, it's you're not completely in control, and that's okay, but just to keep paddling. You're
not even marginally in control. I mean,
right.
I really truly kind of worship the chaos in the universe. That's my worldview. The universe
like that.
is chaos.
Yeah,
and in fact, my least favorite expression in the world, which I cringe every time I hear, is everything happens for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Because my worldview is actually everything happens for no reason.
I like that.
That's
You know,
funny.
the universe is absolute chaos and entropy,
Mm-hmm.
and you are an insignificant mote within it.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know,
Okay,
stop
and
thinking that
I like that,
your reason.
but I do use the everything happens for a reason, and I think I use it as like selfishly, just so I can, if something that I conceive as bad is happening to me, so that I don't get into that like why is this happening to me kind of mindset, you know, which you could easily slip into. What did I do to deserve this?
Right, that's the risk of that expression.
Right.
If
Then,
you think everything happens for a reason, maybe you're part of the reason, and then you start second guessing.
right. That's true. Yeah. So
And a lot of it, it's the why is you know, because the butterfly flapped its wings 4,000 miles from here, and the universe changed direction. It has nothing to do with anything you did.
That's true. I mean, it is very chaotic and random, but sometimes that helps me just put things in perspective. And if it's not, even if it's something that isn't pleasant at that time, I can look back later and go, well, I mean, that taught me this, you know, or I've learned that from this, or because that happened, then this has happened, you know. Because
right. Never stop paddling. Just
Right.
because it's mostly chaos doesn't mean you don't paddle. Absolutely. You learn the lessons, you try to stop swallowing water, and you paddle as hard as you can, while recognizing that the
Right.
river will take you where it wants to regardless.
oh, look, my raft has tipped over, but now I know how to swim.
Always look on the bright side, even
Right.
if you're sitting up on a cross, you know, remember the Monty Python song? Well, so...
I wanted to say your book, very excited about this new book
Okay.
coming out.
Mastering the Lightning
thank
Network. You've got 2 co-authors. We watched a video this morning,
Yes.
and let me just say that you
With
three
Renee,
guys,
and I would say roast beef because I can't remember
it's
his name. I
Olo,
could just
Roast
remember
Beef,
his
and Renee.
nickname. Okay.
You 3 guys were so excited
Yeah.
that I told Tamara after watching it, I felt literally excited.
Yeah, you felt
Oh,
the
good.
I could see the excitement in
You
your
guys
face.
all looked happy.
And so this is a book that you're writing with 2 other people called Mastering the Lightning Network. And obviously you're very excited about it. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so this will be my 3rd O'Reilly book, which is just mind-blowing. Like the very idea that I could be an O'Reilly author when I was pitching Mastering Bitcoin was unthinkable. And the fact that I'm about to start my 3rd book for O'Reilly is bizarre. But one of the things that I've learned is when I first worked with O'Reilly, I was very, very specific about wanting this to be an open source book. This was with Mastering Bitcoin, and to develop it in collaboration with the community and an open process under open licenses. They had experimented with that before. They had released a couple of books where they made them open source after publication.
Okay.
And they published the GitHub they were written on, but no one had ever actually written it in public on GitHub from the beginning and published it open source from day one. I did that with Mastering Bitcoin, and I got quite a lot of collaboration. I think I had probably 20 or 30 people who contributed components, a lot of help and reading and review. And with the 2nd edition, even more. By the time I got to Mastering Ethereum, I started doing more of the conductor, community organizer, like conductor, I mean orchestra conductor, right?
Right.
So I realized that I could get a lot more help from the community. I encouraged a lot more participation. Mastering Ethereum had 180 contributors, 2 authors, 4 reviewers, 2 editors, and more than 4,000 commits, pull requests, issues, etc.
Wow.
So it was a very, very active, very community developed project.
Yeah.
And I ended up writing about 45% of the book. And the rest of it was contributions by 180 different people
Wow,
in the
that's really
community.
cool. Yeah.
And it worked as a model. I focused mostly on keeping a consistent narrative, on deciding what needed to be covered and how it needed to be covered so that it was easy to understand, and structure and all of that. And I didn't need to be an expert in every tiny little technical detail of every part of the book. I read it
Right.
in order to be, but I didn't write it to be
Right.
all of it. And what I want to do with Mastering the Lightning Network is take that even a step further. So I decided to reach out to a couple of the people who are very active in doing either technical work or education. Olalua Ashtokan, Roast Beef as he's known,
Right.
who is the Chief Technology Officer of Lightning Labs, and one of the top technical people in the space who has done enormous amounts of work to get Lightning where it is today, and knows every detail of every part of every nut and bolt, because he wrote probably the most popular client, Lightning client, LND. And Rene Picard, who's been doing for the past 2 years incredible education work and explaining and writing in slides and participating in conversations and protocol development and standards development. And I reached, and it just came together. It took like 8 months.
Right.
The project was proposed to O'Reilly in January. I started working with potential co-authors in February and March. And then, negotiations, renegotiations, contracts, recontracts, setting up infrastructure, planning a release, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I'm hoping to have even more people participate in this and to do it faster than the previous books, and to produce kind of as with the previous books. My final goal is really simple. I want to learn about Lightning. I wish there was a book about Lightning. Mastering Bitcoin and Mastering Ethereum ended up being the book I wish I had when I started learning. My goal for Mastering the Lightning Network is to write the book I wish I had today. It doesn't exist. We're going to write it. And it's going to fill that niche and help, hopefully, thousands of developers learn and then build applications.
How does someone participate? You said that people can help. How do they go about even doing that?
Well, you can find a lot of the information on the website, which is lnbook.info. The book itself is being collaboratively developed on GitHub. We have about, I'm looking at the stats right now, over the time that we've been doing this so far, we've had 42 merged pull requests and 9 people who are active contributors already.
That's awesome.
And it's only been a month.
That's great.
Yeah, the community's growing, and everyone can help. People can help by trying the examples and trying to read and follow the chapters and figuring out where we lost them, or which example didn't work for them, or and giving feedback. People can help with correcting, small grammar, wording mistakes, or improving language, all the way up to writing technical components, doing diagrams, reviewing other people's work, doing editorial work, helping with the community management. It's, like any big open source project, there's a lot of different roles that go towards doing that.
So you don't have to be a complete technical person. You can,
No,
if you
not
want to
at
help
all.
and participate.
I think he was even saying it's good for some noobs to kind of get in there and let you know, I don't understand that.
Yeah, we need focus group, right? So like readers,
Right.
And it's still probably early stages for that, because it's a mess at the moment. It's just little bits of pieces here and there. Very, very early draft. You get to see the sausage making process in all its ugly detail. I'm going to be producing a video that helps people understand how to do a pull request and how to file an issue, so that they can make correction or indicate a problem, so that even non-technical people can set up an account on GitHub and join in the conversation.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Yeah, everyone can help. Even what you're doing right now and helping me talk about it is amazing.
Well, so everyone go to lnbook.info. That sounds exciting. You've also got a podcast called Let's Talk Bitcoin. Tamara and I have been listening to that.
We're in our 412th episode right now.
Wow, that's awesome.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the first English-speaking podcast on Bitcoin that started in March of 2013.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing.
And it's been running continuously once a week since then.
And obviously you've got a YouTube channel. What else? You go out and speak. And Tamara and I have seen you live talk at HoshiCon last year in Vegas, and it was amazing.
I'd rather see him speak than go to a concert.
Yeah, me too.
I'm going to be in San Francisco in a week and a half.
I see that.
For a conference, October 23rd. It's the Blockstack conference. Should be interesting. There's a good lineup of speakers. I'm looking forward to that, visiting San Francisco again. And then, my work supported by my Patreon subscriber community. Covers 100% of my staffing costs are covered through Patreon, which helps me build a team that gets this mission accomplished, which is teach as many people in as many languages and countries as possible about the technical and social implications of open blockchains. It's a very, very focused, very specific mission. It takes a team. It takes a lot of people to make it happen. And I'm enormously grateful for the people who support me with a monthly subscription, because it makes it work without corporate sponsors. So I can be neutral and focused on my audience rather than trying to chase the next paycheck.
Right.
Yeah.
I
love that.
What's the easiest way for someone that wants to support you and wants to know what's going on, where you'll be next? Obviously, you have a web page. Yes,
aantonop.com. AANTONOP is my user ID, which I've had since I was in college.
Oh, wow.
It's my Twitter handle. It's my YouTube channel. It's my website. It's my Patreon page. It's my Facebook page. Like, all of them are AANTONOP with a few exceptions. Someone was already squatting on the Instagram account with the same name.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Someone's got to get you somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But so my website, aantonop.com, you can find information about how to support me or how to get how to find which events I'm speaking at, subscribe to the mailing lists, all of that stuff.
Well, that's awesome. Tamara and I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. We hope to get to see you again. I
do have one last question.
Okay.
I want to go full Anthony Bourdain on you and ask you your death row meal.
Ooh, good one.
If you're familiar with Anthony Bourdain, you know what that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very.
What is yours?
What is my death row meal? I would probably say pasticcio, which is the Greek lasagna. It's a macaroni tube type pasta with ground beef in a spiced tomato sauce with lots of different flavors in it, topped with a bechamel creamy and cheesy layer, and baked in the oven. I learned how to make it from my aunt. It's my favorite thing to make. Unfortunately, now I'm lactose intolerant and on a low carb diet, so I can't eat it anymore.
Oh no,
but,
that's awful.
If I'm on death row, fuck that.
Exactly.
Yeah, good point.
A double order, please.
Real quick.
Double order.
Mine would be
another with a gas chamber. I'm lactose intolerant. I'll handle it myself.
I'm in the same situation. Mine would be a roast beef po' boy. I was born in New Orleans, Louisiana. I love roast beef po' boy, and I'm talking roast beef with gravy and mayonnaise and lettuce. The problem is I can't eat bread anymore. It makes me sick.
Well,
so
back to the inflammation. I think that does have something to do with. I think they're doing studies now that the inflammation it causes inflammation in your brain could lead to depression and anxiety and that kind of thing. I definitely think it affects him. So
you have a gluten sensitivity?
I don't know. I just know that when I eat bread now, I feel horrible.
He feels awful.
By the way, I've been to New Orleans and I absolutely loved it. But the shrimply po' boy that I had there that I still dream about, red onions, shrimp, cheese, and a po' boy.
Yes.
Oh my.
Yeah,
So
I'm the fried oyster po' boy right here. So we've got roast beef, shrimp, and now fried oyster. So
maybe one of these days I should visit New Orleans and do a show there. That would be good.
I love that place. It's got a special
incredible
place. Yeah. I want to thank you for coming on the show. It means the world to us.
Thank you. It's been so much fun.
Yeah. That's always my goal, is that, you know, whoever we're speaking to has a good time and has
Yes.
fun. So I'm glad that you said that. And yes, thank you so much, because I know your time is very valuable, and
Yeah.
And
we
this
really
was a great use of it. Thank you
thank
both,
you.
and let's do this again.
Yeah,
We'd love to.
Have a good day.
Okay.
Take care. Keep
Bye.
running.
I will. Bye-bye.
You keep on his
All right.
toes about that.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
This was another episode of That Bitcoin Show. We want to thank everyone for listening. If you'd like to support the show, check out our website, thatbitcoinshow.com. Follow us on Twitter, Mystical Oaks and Crypto Euclid. And also, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for listening to That Bitcoin Show.